If you have been following the ongoing war of words between conservative media commentators and progressive Democratic politicians, you already know that Ben Shapiro occupies a very specific and very powerful position in that landscape. He has built one of the most listened to conservative platforms in the country on the foundation of a single promise: that facts do not care about your feelings, that logic wins over emotion every time, and that if you sit across from him unprepared, he will dismantle your position in front of his audience before you have fully understood what is happening. He is fast, he is relentless, and he has spent years perfecting the art of the live challenge, the moment where he places a guest or opponent in a position that appears to offer only bad exits. He walked into his live challenge of Jasmine Crockett with every advantage his platform and his reputation provide. He had the home crowd. He had the prepared material. He had the format he has mastered over years of doing exactly this. Her calm response stunned the audience. Not his audience, not her audience, the audience. The room full of people who had come expecting one outcome watched something entirely different unfold. And the silence that spread through that space in the seconds after she finished speaking was the kind of silence that tells you, without any additional commentary, that something genuinely unexpected has just occurred. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, subscribe right now and hit the like button. We bring you the moments from inside the political and media landscape that cut through to what is actually happening, the exchanges that reveal something real about power, preparation, and what it looks like when someone refuses to be defined by the terms their opponent has set. Now let us get into exactly what happened, why Shapiro believed he had the upper hand going into this moment, and why the calm that Crockett brought to her response turned out to be more powerful than anything louder could have been. Ben Shapiro's method is not a mystery. He has explained it publicly, written about it extensively, and demonstrated it so many times across so many platforms that the architecture of his approach is entirely visible to anyone who has spent time studying it. He opens with a rapid-fire series of premises, statements presented as self-evident facts that his audience accepts without examination, and he builds his challenge on top of those premises in a way that makes the challenge appear to be the logical conclusion of facts that have already been established. The speed is deliberate. When premises arrive faster than a person can evaluate them individually, the accumulated weight of the structure feels more solid than any single piece of it actually is. By the time he delivers the challenge that the whole setup has been building toward, the person on the receiving end is already operating on ground that Shapiro has chosen and prepared. It is a genuinely effective approach. It has worked against politicians, academics, journalists, and activists with enough consistency that Shapiro's reputation for winning these encounters is not simply self-generated hype. He does win them, against opponents who have not gone in prepared to engage at the level of the premises rather than the level of the conclusion. Against opponents who accept the framing because they are not entirely certain what is wrong with it even as they sense that something is. Against opponents who respond to the speed with speed of their own and end up inside an argument on terrain that Shapiro has chosen. Crockett did not engage at the level of the conclusion. She went to the premises. The live setting had been arranged with the kind of fanfare that surrounds these high-profile crossover moments between political figures and media commentators who occupy different worlds, but share an enormous combined audience. Shapiro's supporters were present in significant numbers. People who had come specifically to watch the challenge, they expected him to deliver, and the outcome they expected it to produce. There was also a broader audience, people who had come out of genuine curiosity about what the exchange would produce, who did not have a predetermined investment in either outcome. And there were cameras, and there was a live feed, and there was the particular electricity of a public event where both participants understood that what happened in the next hour was going to matter beyond the room. Shapiro opened the way he always opens, confidently, quickly, with the practiced energy of someone who has done this enough times that the nerves, if they exist at all, are entirely invisible. He laid out his initial premises with the speed and assurance that his audience recognizes as his signature. He established the framing he intended to use, positioned the challenge he was building toward, and delivered the first direct provocation with the smooth precision of a person who has rehearsed the move without making it look rehearsed. The audience on his side of the room responded with the energy of people watching someone they trust perform at the level they expected. Crockett let him finish. This was itself a choice, and it was the right choice. There is a version of this encounter where the person being challenged interrupts early, tries to contest the premises as they arrive, and ends up in a rapid back and forth that Shapiro is better equipped for than almost anyone currently operating in political media. Crockett did not go there. She sat with the composure of someone who is entirely comfortable allowing an argument to be fully stated before she responds to it, because she had prepared a response to the full argument, not just to its opening moves, and the full argument was what she needed on the table before she began. When she spoke, the first thing she addressed was not the challenge itself. It was the foundational premise that the challenge had been built upon, the specific assumption, presented as self-evident in Shapiro's rapid-fire opening, that was in fact neither self-evident nor accurate when measured against the documented record. She identified it specifically. She named it clearly. And she produced, in language simple enough that every person in that room could follow it without a background in policy or law, the documented evidence that showed why the premise did not hold. The speed of the room changed. Shapiro's method depends significantly on momentum, on the sense that the argument is moving forward so quickly that there is no natural stopping point for examination. Crockett's response stopped the momentum at the foundation, before the structure built on top of it could be defended as a whole. She had not argued with his conclusion. She had shown that the ground beneath the conclusion was not what he had represented it to be. And once that is visible to a room, once the audience can see that the foundation of an elaborate argument is not solid, the entire edifice looks different than it did 60 seconds earlier. Shapiro pushed back immediately. He is not someone who absorbs a challenge to his premises without a response, and his response was quick, confident, and designed to reestablish the validity of the foundation Crockett had challenged. He deployed additional data, the kind of rapid statistical citation that is another signature of his approach, numbers delivered at speed in a way that creates the impression of overwhelming evidential support for the position he is defending. In settings where the other person cannot evaluate the numbers in real time, this works. It creates a kind of data fog that makes it difficult to see clearly enough to push back effectively. Crockett was not in the data fog. She had done the preparation at the level of the specific statistics Shapiro was known to cite on this subject. She knew which figures he used, she knew where those figures came from, and she knew the specific methodological issues with the sources he relied on most heavily, issues that did not require statistical expertise to understand. Issues she could explain in plain language to a general audience in a way that made the problem visible without making the explanation feel like a lecture. She walked through it, calmly, without raising her voice, without the kind of performance of expertise that can itself become a barrier between a speaker and an audience. She spoke to the room the way someone speaks when they are not trying to impress anyone with what they know, when they are simply sharing what the record shows because the record is what matters. The audience that had come as Shapiro's supporters was quiet in a way it had not been quiet before. This is the detail that people who watched the clip returned to most often in the commentary that followed, not the silence of the room after her response, though that silence was significant, but the specific quality of the quiet that had fallen over the portion of the audience that had arrived expecting a very different dynamic. It was not hostile quiet. It was the quiet of people who are genuinely processing something, who came in with a fixed expectation and are now sitting with information that the expectation had not accounted for. That kind of quiet is harder to produce than applause. It means something different. It means the room is thinking. Shapiro went to his second line of attack. He shifted from the statistical argument to a more personal challenge, a direct question about Crockett's record, a specific vote or position that he had framed in a way designed to place her in a corner similar to the ones he has successfully built around other political figures in live settings. The question was constructed with his characteristic precision. It was specific enough to require a direct answer, framed tightly enough that the most obvious responses all seemed to create openings for the follow-up he had clearly prepared. She answered it directly, not with the hedging and qualification that politicians often use when a question has been designed to trap them, not with the pivot to talking points that Shapiro's audience has learned to recognize and that his method is specifically designed to make look evasive. She answered the question that was asked, in full, with the context that she believed was necessary for the answer to be understood accurately, and then she turned the specificity of the question back on the frame it had been asked inside, pointing out, again calmly and again with documentation, why the frame itself misrepresented the situation it was claiming to describe. This is the move that stunned the audience, not because it was dramatic, not because it was delivered with rhetorical flourish or emotional force. but because it was so completely composed, so entirely without defensiveness, and so thoroughly grounded in verifiable specifics that it left no surface for the usual follow-up to grab onto. Shapiro's method, in its most effective form, depends on the other person giving him something to work with, an evasion he can name, an emotion he can contrast with logic, a factual error he can correct publicly. Crockett gave him none of those things. She gave him a direct, documented, calmly delivered answer that engaged honestly with his question, and then showed, specifically and without drama, why the question had been built on a mischaracterization. The silence that followed spread from the section of the audience that had been quieter earlier and moved across the room in a wave that reached even the most committed Shapiro supporters. It was brief, these moments always are, because a live setting does not allow silence to persist for long before someone fills it. But it was complete while it lasted, and its completeness communicated something that the clip captured and that millions of people subsequently watched and recognized. The audience had come expecting to watch Ben Shapiro do what Ben Shapiro does. They were watching something else. They were watching someone engage with his method at the level of its foundations rather than its surface, and they were watching that engagement produce something his method had not prepared a response for. Shapiro recovered with the professionalism of someone who has been doing live media for long enough that recovery is itself a practiced skill. He moved to another line of argument, reframed the exchange in terms more favorable to the position he was defending, and engaged Crockett on several additional points across the remainder of the session with the energy and intelligence that his audience expects from him. He did not collapse. He did not concede. He continued, because that is what you do in a live format when a moment has not gone the way you anticipated. You continue, and you trust that the overall impression you make across the full hour is what the audience will remember. But the clip does not show the full hour. The clip shows the moment the silence fell. And that moment, compressed into the 90 seconds or 2 minutes that circulated across every platform within hours of the event, told a story that the full session's recovery could not entirely revise. The story it told was simple and specific. A challenge had been delivered by someone who has built a career on the effectiveness of his challenges, and the response to that challenge had been so composed, so grounded, and so precisely targeted at the foundations of the challenge itself, that the room had gone quiet in a way it had not gone quiet before. The commentary that followed was broader and less partisan than these moments often produce. Media critics who cover the intersection of political commentary and public debate noted that Crockett had done something technically sophisticated. That engaging with Shapiro at the level of premises rather than conclusions is the correct strategic response to his method, and that doing it in language accessible enough for a general audience without sacrificing the precision necessary to make the engagement meaningful is a genuinely difficult thing to execute under live pressure. Conservative commentators who are honest about the mechanics of these exchanges acknowledged that the specific moment had not gone according to the expected script. Liberal observers used it as evidence of something they had been arguing for some time, that the reputation for invincibility that surrounds certain media figures is partly a product of the quality of opposition they have typically faced, and that when the opposition improves its preparation and its method, the invincibility proves to be more conditional than it appeared. What the commentary across all of those perspectives shared was a recognition that the calm itself had been the most significant element of Crockett's response. In a media landscape that rewards volume, that treats heat as a proxy for seriousness, and that has normalized the idea that the most passionate response is the most genuine one, the composure she had maintained throughout the exchange communicated something that a louder, more visibly combative response would not have communicated. It communicated that she was not rattled. It communicated that she had not been surprised by anything Shapiro had introduced because she had prepared for it. It communicated that the challenge, however skillfully constructed, had landed in a place where it had already been anticipated and where a response had already been built. Calm, in the right circumstances, is the most powerful register available to a public figure under pressure. It is more powerful than anger because it cannot be dismissed as emotional. It is more powerful than elaborate counter-rhetoric because it does not give the opposition a performance to critique. It is the register of someone who is not performing at all, who has simply done the work and is now presenting it, clearly and without embellishment, to anyone who is willing to engage with it honestly. Crockett has demonstrated an understanding of this across a series of high-profile exchanges that is now consistent enough to be considered a defining characteristic of her public approach. She does not try to outshout the room. She outprepares it. Ben Shapiro challenged Jasmine Crockett live in front of his audience with the full weight of his platform and his reputation and his carefully constructed method behind the challenge. She responded with preparation that reached beneath the challenge to its foundations, with documentation that the foundations could not support, and with a composure so complete that the room went quiet in the specific way that rooms go quiet when something genuinely unexpected has happened. The audience had come for a debate. What they witnessed was a demonstration of what it looks like when someone has done the real work, refuses to be defined by the terms their opponent has set, and delivers the truth of the documented record in language calm enough and clear enough that even a room full of people who arrived expecting a different outcome cannot entirely dismiss what they have just heard. That is what stunned them, not a dramatic moment, not a theatrical comeback. Just preparation meeting challenge with complete composure, in public on camera, and the silence that follows when a room full of people realizes that what they expected to happen has not happened, and that what happened instead was more interesting and more real than what they came in hoping to see. If you stayed with this story all the way to the end, do two things right now: hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. We are going to keep bringing you the moments that reveal something true about power, preparation, and what it looks like when someone refuses to be cornered by the terms someone else has set. The next story is already coming. You do not want to miss it.